Welcome to the Office on Violence Against Women, also referred to as OVW, pre-application information session for the fiscal year 2019 Rural Sexual Assault, Domestic Violence, Dating Violence, and Stalking Program solicitation. OVW Rural Team member Sue Puglisi, and is meant to serve as a source of information regarding the rural application. Although I will not review every page and section of the solicitation, I will highlight the Rural Program Grant and application. Eligibility. Eligibility is mentioned on the cover of the rural solicitation and also at the bottom of page 5 of the solicitation. Eligible applicants are limited to states and territories, Indian tribes, local governments, and nonprofit public or private entities, including tribal nonprofit organizations. I will discuss this in depth further into the presentation. Both new and continuation applications are being accepted. Grantees that receive rural funding in FY 2017 or FY 2018 are not eligible to apply. Deadlines. Deadlines is mentioned on the cover of the rural solicitation and also at the bottom of page 18. You'll note that applications are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on February 14, 2019. I will discuss this in depth further into the presentation. Registration. You will also note on the cover of the solicitation that in order to submit an application, all applicants must obtain a Data Universal Number System, or DUNS, number and register online with the System for Award Management, or SAM, and with grants.gov. I strongly encourage you to register immediately, but no later than January 23, 2019. Registration includes several steps: obtaining a DUNS number, ensuring that you registered within the SAM system, and registering on grants.gov. I'll go over each of these steps individually as I move further into the presentation. If you are considering applying, a letter of intent should be submitted to OVW by January 29, 2019. For a sample letter of intent, please go to the OVW website and click under the Resources for Applicants section. The letters of intent are not mandatory. However, they are very helpful to OVW internally in attempting to identify the potential volume of applications that are expected to be received and to plan accordingly for the peer review process. If you haven't submitted one yet, please do so. Program description. Page 1 of the solicitation provides background on the history and goals for the rural program. The rural program supports efforts to enhance the safety of rural victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking, and supports projects uniquely designed to address and prevent these crimes in rural areas. The geographic isolation, transportation barriers, economic structure, particularly strong social and cultural pressures, and lack of available services in rural jurisdictions significantly compound the problems confronted by those seeking support and services to end the violence in their lives. These factors also complicate the ability of the criminal justice system to investigate and prosecute sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking cases. In addition, socio-cultural, economic, and geographic barriers create difficulties for victim services providers to identify and assist victims of these crimes. Program scope and purpose areas. The FY 2019 Rural Program has 3 purpose areas. You'll find this information on page 1 of the solicitation. I won't read the purpose areas to you verbatim. However, in a nutshell, all projects funded through the rural program shall fall under one or more of these purpose areas. Purpose area number 1, to identify, assess, and appropriately respond to child, youth, and adult victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking in rural communities by encouraging collaboration. Number 2, to establish and expand nonprofit, non-governmental, state, tribal, territorial, and local government victim services in rural communities, and/or to increase the safety and well-being of women and children in rural communities. I do want to discuss purpose area number 3 in more detail. You'll note that purpose area number 3 has 2 prongs. One is dealing directly and immediately with violence against women crimes, and the other refers to increasing awareness and prevention efforts. For many applicants, the rural program is one of the few sources of funding to support the provision of core services for victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. For this reason, OVW will only fund applications that propose projects that implement a collaborative response, support victim services, and/or create a direct response to these crimes in rural communities. Proposed projects must devote at least 70% of their project activities and budget to rural program purpose areas number 1, 2, and/or 3A. Applicants may apply to address purpose area number 3B, but no more than 30% of the project budget and activities may be dedicated to prevention and awareness activities. Strategies. In addition to these purpose areas, rural program grantees must implement one or more strategies as outlined in the authorizing statute. This information may be found on page 2 of the solicitation. Again, I won't read this information verbatim, but I will summarize the 5 strategies. Number 1, implementing, expanding, and establishing cooperative efforts and projects. To investigate and prosecute incidents of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, including developing multidisciplinary teams, focusing on high-risk cases with the goal of preventing domestic and dating violence homicides. Strategy number 2, providing treatment, counseling, advocacy, legal assistance, and other long-term and short-term victim and population-specific services. Strategy number 3, working in cooperation with the community to develop education and prevention strategies directed towards such issues. Strategy number 4, developing, enlarging, or strengthening programs addressing sexual assault. And strategy number 5, developing programs and strategies that focus on the specific needs of victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking who reside in remote, rural, and geographically isolated areas. OVW priority areas. Priority area number 1, reduce violent crime against women and promote victim safety. Applications addressing this priority area through activities proposed under the rural program's purpose areas must describe how the proposed activities will reduce violent crime and promote victim safety. Priority area number 2, increase the response to victims of human trafficking. Applicants must identify how they will engage in outreach to trafficked victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking, and tailor services to address the unique needs of these victims. Priority area number 3, include substance abuse professionals in a coordinated community response to violent crimes and increase victim access to substance abuse services. Applicants are encouraged to partner with agencies that provide assistance to victims with substance abuse and mental health issues. Priority area number 4, increase efforts to combat stalking. Applicants are encouraged to address stalking in their proposed projects. Activities that compromise victim safety and recovery. You will find this information on page 3 of the solicitation. I will be reviewing for scope, reasonableness, and safety issues. Although I am not going to spend a lot of time reviewing the activities that compromise victim safety and recovery section, out-of-scope activities and/or activities requiring prior approval, I strongly recommend that you read through these sections carefully and contact the rural unit directly if you have any questions. Federal award information. Award period. The grant award period is for 36 months beginning on October 1st, 2019. Award amounts. Funding levels for FY 2019 are as follows. Continuation applicants will be limited to $750,000 for the entire 36 months. New applications will be limited to $500,000. OVW has a discretion to award grants for greater or lesser amounts than requested and to negotiate the scope of work and budget with applicants prior to making an award. Mandatory program requirements. Applicants will be required to participate in OVW-sponsored training and technical assistance, attend a new grantee orientation unless exempted by OVW, and provide services within statutorily defined rural areas and communities. By statute, at least 75% of the total amount of funding made available for this program must be allocated to eligible entities located in rural states. The term rural state means a state that has a population density of 57 or fewer persons per square mile, or a state in which the largest county has fewer than 250,000 people, based on the most recent decennial census. In case you are interested, the following states are designated as rural based upon the definition of rural state within the VAWA 2013 statute and the 2010 census. The states are as follows: Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Maine, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, South Dakota, Utah, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming. And the 5 U.S. territories are American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and Virgin Islands. The states that are designated as rural are also listed in footnote number 2 at the bottom of page 5 in the solicitation. However, regardless of whether an application is submitted by an entity from a rural state or a non-rural state, all applicants must target services in a rural area or community. The statute defines the terms rural area and rural community as A, any area or community, respectively, no part of which is within an area designated as a standard metropolitan statistical area by the Office of Management and Budget. Letter B, any area or community, respectively, that is within an area designated as a metropolitan statistical area or considered as part of a metropolitan statistical area, and located in a rural census tract, or letter C, any federally recognized Indian tribe. All applicants, whether from statutorily defined rural states or non-rural states, must submit the eligibility and service area documentation as identified via the link that is provided in the rural solicitation on page 6. Additional eligibility information. Eligible service area documentation. As I stated previously, the rural statute within the Violence Against Women Act requires that rural funds are directed to victims residing within areas that are rural eligible. To demonstrate that the areas that your agency is proposing targeting services to are rural eligible, every application other than those submitted by federally recognized Indian tribes, which are statutorily defined as rural, must include the proper printed documentation demonstrating that the proposed service area meets its eligibility requirements. Instructions to complete the documentation process, the rural eligibility documentation process, can be found via the link provided in the rural solicitation on page 6. The rural program does not require a map of your service area, only the documentation that the targeted service area is, in fact, rural. This is a requirement, and non-submission of the rural eligible service area documentation will preclude your application from being considered. Required partnerships. All eligible applications must include a sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking victim service provider as a formal project partner and/or the lead applicant as demonstrated through the required Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU for short, or letters of support. The letters of support are for state, tribal, territory, or local court applicants only, if applicable. A complete overview of the criteria used to determine victim service provider can be found on page 7 of the solicitation in this section. Additionally, eligible applications, including those submitted by a victim service provider, must include at least one project partner and must include agencies and organizations necessary to implement the proposed project. Delivery of legal assistance. In previous years, legal assistance was limited to legal assistance in seeking protection orders and limited immigration matters. With the implementation of VAWA 2013, legal services have been expanded to include comprehensive legal service such as divorce, custody, and child support. Legal certification. All applicants proposing to provide legal assistance with funds under the FY 2019 Rural Program must certify in writing regarding their expertise and training. The certification should be made in the form of a letter on letterhead and signed and dated by the authorized representative. A sample certification letter can be found on the OVW website via a link on page 8 of the rural solicitation under this section. Any person providing legal assistance with funds through this program has to show they have demonstrated expertise in providing legal assistance to victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking in the targeted population, or is partnered with an entity or person that has demonstrated expertise as described in subparagraph A and has completed or will complete training in connection with domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking and related legal issues, including training on evidence-based risk factors for domestic and dating violence homicide. The requirement continues, and I'm summarizing, that applicants proposing to provide legal assistance with funds under the FY 2019 Rural Program must certify that the training program must have been developed with input from and in collaboration with a tribal, state, territorial, or local domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking victim service provider or coalition, as well as appropriate tribal, state, territorial, and local law enforcement officials. Will inform and continue to inform sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking programs and coalitions about their work. And finally, the grantee's organizational policies do not require mediation or counseling involving offenders and victims physically together in cases where sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, or child sexual abuse is an issue. If the certification is not included, the application will not go forward to peer review. Again, a sample certification letter can be found on the OVW website via a link on page 8 of the rural solicitation under this section. Application and submission information. Formatting and technical requirements. No more than 20 pages for the project narrative. Narratives exceeding 20 pages will not be reviewed past 20 pages. The summary data sheet on page 9 of the solicitation is not included within the 20-page limit for the project narrative. The summary data sheet may be single or double-spaced and may be 1 to 4 pages in length. Please make sure that all required elements listed within this section are included. This is mandatory information. Applications that do not include all mandatory components will be considered substantially incomplete and will not be considered for funding. Application contents. Applications must include the following required documents and demonstrate that the program eligibility requirements have been met: the project narrative, budget detail worksheet and narrative, Memorandum of Understanding or MOU, letters of support for state, tribal, territory, or local court applicants only if applicable, eligible service area documentation, and legal certification. If an application packet does not include these 5 mandatory elements, the application will not be forwarded to peer review. Proposal abstract. Abstracts are to be no more than 2 pages and double-spaced. Budgets. Budgets must display a clear link between the specific project activities and the proposed budget items and not contain items that are not supported by the project narrative. Include funds to attend OVW-sponsored training and technical assistance. Please note that the OVW training and technical assistance allocation is $10,000. Applicants from Alaska, Hawaii, and U.S. territories should allocate $15,000. These are minimum amounts to be allocated for OVW-sponsored training and technical assistance and do not preclude an applicant from including more funds if they feel warranted. Please include funds or describe other resources available to the applicant to support activities to ensure access for individuals with disabilities. Deaf, hard of hearing individuals, and persons with limited English proficiency. Please compensate all project partners as reflected in the MOUs or the letters of support. Distinguish clearly between subawards and contracts in allocating any grant funds to other entities. Generally, food and beverage costs are not allowed, and under no circumstances may OVW funding be used to supply food and or beverages during refreshment breaks. OVW may approve funds to provide food and or beverages for a meal at a meeting, conference training, or other event, but you must meet one of the exceptions found on page 22 of the rural solicitation. The Memorandum of Understanding or MOU. Please refer to information about a Memorandum of Understanding on pages 13 through 14 of the solicitation. The requirements are similar to previous years, but nevertheless, we strongly encourage you to carefully read the requirements for MOUs found in this section. We ask that the MOU is very specific and mirrors the narrative and budget. Please pay close attention to the required information referencing if applying under the trafficking priority area on page 14. Letters of support. Letters of support are for state, tribal, territory, and local court applicants only if applicable. Court applicants may submit letters of support if precluded from entering into MOUs. Forms. Application and submission information. The following forms will be generated and completed during the application submission process: the SF-424, the standard assurances and certifications regarding lobbying, debarment, suspension, and other responsibility matters, and drug-free workplace requirements, which is form number 4061/6, and the financial capability questionnaire. Confidentiality notice form. All applicants are required to acknowledge that they have received notice that grantees and sub-grantees must comply with the confidentiality and privacy requirement of the Violence Against Women Act as amended. Other forms. You will find other required forms and attachments to be similar to previous years. They include disclosure of process related to executive compensation, if applicable, the pre-award risk assessment, indirect cost rate agreement, the letter of non-supplanting, financial accounting practices, etc. Registration. Every applicant must obtain a Data Universal Number System, or DUNS number, and register online with System for Award Management, or SAM, well before the grant deadline. There is a reason that we set a deadline of January 23rd, 2019, as the process to register for DUNS and SAM is extremely lengthy. If you do not have a DUNS number and or are not current in the SAM system, you should begin this process as soon as possible. And you'll find this information on pages 17 through 18 of the rural solicitation. Register with grants.gov as soon as possible if you haven't already done so. The registration process is not one that can be completed quickly. It takes time, possibly days, and you should begin this process as soon as possible. Every year we have a handful of applicants that didn't make the deadline because they were delinquent with their SAM and or grants.gov registration. Submission of applications. The FY 2019 OVW rural application will be submitted through grants.gov. If you have questions specific to the registration or submission process through grants.gov, please contact grants.gov customer support at 1-800-518-4726. Grants.gov customer service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with the exception of federal holidays. OVW policy on duplicate applications. If an applicant submits multiple versions of the same application, OVW will review only the most recent version submitted. And you'll find this information on page 8 of solicitation. OVW policy on late submissions. Applications submitted after 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on February 14, 2019 will not be considered for funding unless the applicant receives OVW permission to submit a late application. In limited circumstances, OVW will approve a request to submit an application after the due date. This information can be found on page 20 of the FY 2019 rural solicitation. OVW's approval of a late submission request is not an indication of the application's final disposition. Applications approved for late submission are still subject to all of the review process and criteria described in this solicitation. Failure to begin registration or application submission by the deadline stated in the chart within the rural solicitation is not an acceptable reason for late submission. To ensure fairness for all applicants, OVW requires that applicants requesting late submission adhere to the policies noted on page 20 of the FY 2019 rural solicitation. Experiencing unforeseeable technical issues. Applicants who experience unforeseen technical issues, please read through the procedures now as opposed to later, and familiarize yourself with the procedures in the event of a technical difficulty. You must follow the procedures as written on pages 20 through 21 to be considered for a late submission. The same goes for the policy regarding extraordinary natural or man-made disasters. We would hope that none of our applicants ever needs to exercise the policy, but it is there if needed. Unallowable costs. For a list of unallowable costs, please go to page 22 of the rural solicitation. Application review information. All applications will be subject to a peer review and a programmatic review that is fair and based on the criteria outlined in the solicitation. Information regarding the review and selection process begins on page 24 of the solicitation. The review consists of assessing for scope, activities that compromise victim safety, and past performance. Accommodations and language access. Please note the language where applicants are encouraged to allocate grant funds to support activities that help ensure individuals with disabilities and deaf individuals and persons with limited English proficiency having meaningful and full access to their programs. Grantees have a responsibility to ensure that all products, such as websites, videos, and other materials, must ensure that they are accessible to persons with disabilities. Contact information. For assistance with the requirements of this solicitation, please contact OVW at area code 202-307-6026. This is the main number at OVW. Or you can contact us at ovw.rural@usdoj.gov. Now I'm going to provide you with a short presentation about the Grants Financial Management Division. The next couple of slides, I am going to focus on aspects of your application that relate to the documents that our financial team, the Grants Financial Management Division, or GFMD, reviews. More specifically, I'll discuss some items that GFMD has identified from prior year applications that could help with expediting our review process. So far, I'm going to highlight certain aspects of the pre-award risk assessment and provide you a link to a detailed webinar on how to develop the budget that will be included in your application. The first thing I'll highlight are the items identified in the summary data sheet, which is completed by all applicants. Specifically, two items I would like to discuss are the single audit response and the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure. OVW requests that all applicants provide a statement as to whether they have expended $750,000 or more in federal funds during their last fiscal year. If you have, then please indicate that and also specify the end date of your last fiscal year. However, GFMD is finding that applicants do not always include this information and leave out whether or not they have met the threshold or the end date of the last fiscal year is not included. Please ensure this question is answered in its entirety on the summary data sheet. That's extremely important. So another item I'd like to highlight from the solicitation is specifically for nonprofit organizations. If you use the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure to determine your executive's compensation, you must reference the additional information section that provides the required disclosure letter. I'd like to highlight that there are 4 parts of this disclosure letter that must be provided to OVW in order to comply with this requirement. The sample letter that outlines all four parts of the disclosure. So please be sure to follow the sample and provide a response to each of the 4 pieces. The next item I'd like to discuss are the financial accounting practices, which assist GFMD during their pre-award risk assessment review for all applications. Each applicant must prepare a response to all 10 questions, and each question has multiple parts. OVW has noticed from prior years that applicants do not always fully answer all parts of the questions, which in turn requires GFMD to reach out to the applicant, which may delay recommendations. Some of the most common issues that we've encountered have been, for example, question number 2, where the applicant indicates that they do not indeed have internal policies, but they don't provide a brief list of topics covered in the policies and procedures. Another example of incomplete responses include question number 3, where the applicant does not provide a brief summary of the organization's process for tracking expenditures, and more specifically, whether or not it tracks budgeted versus actual expenditures. So these are just a few examples, but basically, please make sure you read each piece of each question and provide a full and comprehensive response. Contact information. This next slide will quickly highlight some resources that are available that should be used as you're creating the budget to be submitted with the application. Over the last year, GFMD has worked to develop a detailed webinar presentation on how to assist applicants in developing a budget to be submitted with their OVW applications. They want to help reduce any challenges you may face with the budget and make it clear what they look for when they review your budget. And this webinar provides some insight as to what OVW financial staff considers during their review. Please use the following link: www.justice.gov/OVW/resources-applicants. The webinar can be found under the Budget Information section on this page. Next up is the Uniform Guidance, which can be found at 2 CFR 200. Then another resource is a DOJ financial guide, as well as a program-specific solicitation. If you need assistance finding these resources, please contact the GFMD help desk. We know this can be a lot of information to process, so if you have any questions about the GFMD information discussed, please feel free to contact the GFMD help desk at 888-514-8556 or by email at ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov. Thank you, and good luck in your application process.